We are another episode of Conversations with Crystal. Just making sure that conversations around education are always centered. So, from early education to the higher education and just education in our everyday life. So, I am joined today by Miss Deidre Anderson, who is Executive Director of United Inner City Services. How are you doing today, Deidre?
I'm good. I'm actually a CEO these days.
CEO. All right. Well, upgraded
Yes.
title. I will ensure that in my sharing across the internet, once it's working accordingly for us, that I update that. So CEO of United Inner City Services, Deidre Anderson. Okay, we'll start again. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
I am doing well. Glad to know that my young one is safe in your care over there, specifically on this day. She was excited to go to school. She wanted to see her Nikki. So that was always good. I actually had a chance to record one of these conversations with Miss Nikki yesterday. So she was a little anxious, a little nervous. She had her notes and everything, and she just wanted to make sure that she did a good job. But really, what I wanted to do specifically in talking to both of you is first have her perspective as an early education practitioner, professional, and then you in a leadership role. And so you have a very extensive bio, from serving as CEO of United Inner City Services and working in K-12 systems. Anything else that you feel like it's important to share with people about your background before we dive into the questions?
It probably relates just a little bit to my philosophy of education. I
Okay.
do the work that I do because of the educational privilege that I've had in my life, and recognize that if it hadn't been for the phenomenal educational institutions that I've been able to participate in, I wouldn't be where I am today. And so in all the work I do, I tend to try to recreate the
Mhm.
positive feelings that I had in my other school environments, and inspire teachers and families to recognize that, everything we do in life in some way does lead back to education or the lack thereof.
Absolutely. So if you were finishing the statement, education is maybe something that has been instilled upon you. Like you said, you've had educational privilege, or even as you think about your children and your grandchildren. So finishing the phrase education is, what would you say?
Education is to me something that traditionally in the Black community and also in immigrant communities is that it hasn't always felt like it was within our reach, simply
Right.
because of the ways that we've been denied access and the resources have not always been equitable. And I really recognize, especially the longer I remain directly in the field of education, how fortunate I was growing up in Iowa and Minneapolis as a kid.
Mhm.
Iowa and Minnesota have had two of the strongest education systems in the nation historically, and went to undergrad in Iowa as well. And really, for me, education is a gateway, a door opener. It's that enlightenment of the mind. There's things that you can't explain to someone that hasn't gone to college or didn't finish high school. That it's the things that are intangible, that happen in our minds, that a good education provides. And I am a teacher at heart. And I think that is because I've had amazing teachers, whether they were formal teachers or they were informal teachers. And, you know, we've all had a teacher that we frankly didn't connect with. We had
Right.
professors in college that wish that we could just skip that class and clap out of it and never have to don that teacher's door. And they teach us determination, they teach us problem solving, they teach us patience. But that wonderful teacher inspires. That teacher really makes you think that you can do the impossible. And that is the world that I hope that we can create through the work we're doing. And if I'd have known then what I know now, childhood, and that
Mhm.
90% of your brains develop by age 3, and how absolutely everything we're doing before a child ever even enters kindergarten is essential. It's like building a house and you don't have a foundation, and you go back and you
Right.
try to put the foundation on and the house never fits on it. Like, you're forever playing catch up. And so if we would just do this for all kids, and make it's a civil rights issue, that if kids don't get a quality early childhood education, we're not talking about third grade, we're talking about kindergarten. You're already 3 years
Mhm.
behind your peers, and then that grows exponentially, unfortunately, and that gap just gets wider and wider.
I think you said it so efficiently there, and I think just kind of from my perspective, I think maybe early education was one of the things I took for granted. I was able to start school at 3, and even in having Mari, it was like, well, of course she's going to go to some early childhood child care situation, and just even in thinking of the conversation having with Miss Nikki, having the distinction between early education, daycare, and babysitting. There are people who are babysitters, daycare providers, but what I really think is important to make that distinction is that they're the learning, as you said, the 90% of a child's brain being developed before the age of 5. So why that is so important. And even, thinking of where St. Mark Center is positioned in one of the zip codes with the lowest life expectancy, what that means for the overall early childhood landscape, which is kind of a question that I have a little bit later. But just, were there any pivotal moments that you would say just kind of set you on this path to education? You talked about a little bit about the importance of those inspiring teachers. So was it another teacher? Was it an experience you got to have, inside of school, outside of school, that really just set you on your journey to being Chief Executive Officer of early
Um,
childhood?
my undergrad was elementary ed and social work, and I
Uh,
actually earlier in my career didn't use the educational aspects of it. So I primarily did social work early on, and
uh,
then later did a master's in public administration and ended up working in schools. And so it's, for me, been the intersection of doing community development and family supportive services and all those other things that impact schools, to now be in an education environment more directly. I think the pivotal moment in my career probably was when I went to grad school, and where I personally recognized that I needed more education to be recognized for my intellect, and for my intellect then to then turn into a return where I would be respected and valued at the level that I am.
right,
So I was a foster care worker and had a caseload of kids that had therapists and all these other people. And I'm writing treatment plans for people with PhDs. And
right,
I'm like, what is wrong with this equation? Like, there's something
right.
wrong here. And I looked at lots of different things, but I couldn't be more grateful. I did an MPA with an urban administration emphasis. And so, and fortunately for 10 years when I was in the Hickman Mills School District, had a very forward thinking Black superintendent, female, Dr. Marge Williams, who remains a mentor, mama friend of mine, who recognized it wasn't just what we did in schools, it was the relationships and the partnerships and the connections that we made in the community, that were also essential. And so now here I am all these years later leading a nonprofit where I have even greater flexibility to do those things. And it is all about partnerships and connections and relationships beyond just what we're doing in the classroom. That makes it easier for a Nikki who is teaching and has a parent that says, I want to go back to school. Well, we maybe already have a partnership with Casey Scholars or someplace that can
Right.
help that parent find some scholarship funding and focus on the education of the children, but have relationships with other organizations that are better at those things. Instead of trying to be all things to all people, just put the puzzle together in a way that really has an impact on the community and neighborhood. Schools have always historically been that place in a neighborhood where people congregated, where people came together, and it was like the lifeblood of social activity. And that's what we try to emulate in our early childhood centers. We have all kinds of family fun and, as you well know, arts events and things, and that's because we're the connecting place for them. And it's exciting now to think about broadening our scope to go into a part of this region that we haven't historically operated in, but where we can garner the respect from a community that is in need of some quality early childhood education, that may or may not have been exposed to the level of quality that UICS provides, but now they are getting that same opportunity.
Yes, and I'm going to jump ahead to the question I have about your vision, but I also just want to say, as a parent, I can absolutely appreciate the partnerships, and I feel like this is not so much a UICS commercial, but just, I appreciate the partnerships, and I think it just really kind of sets this center apart. I just remember being on what I thought was a waiting list, and then when I finally got a call to say, no, your daughter, your future child can come here, and it was absolutely a relief. And it's funny when you talk about partnerships, I actually even heard about St. Mark's Center, UICS, from helping to volunteer with Cotillion. We brought students to volunteer, and I was like, okay, well, this was a couple of years before even being pregnant, but just even kind of seeing how that community event came together, and that just, the center being on my radar. So thank you all for all the work that you do there. So just jumping ahead to your vision for UICS, being able to have the Metro Center, being able to have the new center in the Northland. And so just like I said, your vision for UICS, and how does this really impact the landscape of early education in Kansas City? We've heard about, being a early childhood desert and all of that. So how does your work really impact that landscape, would you say?
My vision is more personal for each child and family and teacher. My vision is that we create a world in the early childhood field that mirrors the lives of children, where they don't leave their homes and walk into, whether it's a UICS center or somebody in their neighborhood who's providing care in their home, where they see that connection between school and home, where their teachers look like them, their teachers honor them, they appreciate them, they know the neighborhood context that they're growing up in, they know something personally about their parents. I went to a home-based daycare in Des Moines, Iowa as a kid, and Mary Ennis was such an integral part of my family that when we threw my mother's surprise 70th birthday party a few years ago, she was there. She was at the surprise party for my mom, because that's how important she was to our family. And she didn't just provide daycare, she educated us, and she made it possible for my single mom to go to work and not worry about her kids. So that's the other part of it. Like, we're living in a pandemic world. We're living in a world filled with racial injustice and rioting and anger and frustration. And when parents drop their children off, they need peace. They need to know their children are safe. They need to know that they're learning. They need to know that they too are being respected and not judged because their kid tantrums or isn't learning their ABCs fast enough, or whatever that might be. And that we would take collective ownership. My vision is collective ownership of children. It's kind of a trite phrase that people say, children are our future. I mean, I truly believe that. And if we don't do this and do it well and do it right, I'm gonna be old one day. And some of the kids in here are caring for me in one form or fashion. And I want them to take care of me. And so, we're more alike than we are different. I have rural, urban, and suburban roots, and believe that, we unfortunately have bamboozled ourselves into kind of creating this monolithic world where, you know, if you're from Kansas City, everybody, you know, knows what Southeast High School is, or like that there's only one way to be a Kansas Cityan. And
Right.
there's so many ways to be a Kansas Cityan. And just because you look at somebody and they're visibly Black doesn't even mean they're from America. Like they might be from
True.
Tanzania and just recently emigrated here, and in their home culture being respected, appreciated, embraced. Are we sending that kid into culture shock because we start feeding them bland American food and don't have anything in our food program that is more representative of what they've been eating at home? And so it probably sounds very utopian, but I think that's what a good leader does. Is I'm supposed to envision utopia and then work backwards to figure out how I create as close to that reality as possible.
Awesome. Well, speaking of being a leader, and you talked a little bit about it before, but just we're living in a pandemic, so it's crazy to think, you know, March 2020 like just kind of blew up, and maybe we anticipated it, maybe we didn't. But just when you think about the conversations that you and your team have had, what can you share about that? You know, what I'm sure you've had some sleepless nights about the decision making to keep the centers, well, reopen the centers, and what that all look like. So, what are some of those conversations like? And I guess, what would you say you've learned from this process?
You got to see, even if we don't have a good connection. I'm shaking my head. Can you hear me?
Okay. I get
I
it.
turned it on for a minute so you can see me shake my head, but as soon
Yeah.
as I turn it on, it tells me that the internet is unstable. So
Okay,
it's
no
not
worries,
meant
no
for you
worries.
to it's not meant for you to see me today for whatever reason. But
No worries.
um I don't know if I even know where to begin. Like March
I
feels like
understand.
a million years ago.
Right?
And you know, every day brings a new challenge, a new decision that I have never made before that I have to make. I've had to learn to trust my judgment in ways that I never could have imagined I would. I've never been one who expects for the staff to 100% separate home and work. Like, I just don't think that is possible. You have a fight with your husband in the morning, it's going to impact how you show up at work.
Love
Now, do we
it.
have an employee assistance program and other ways that we ask our employees to kind of try to put a little boundaries around that?
Right.
Absolutely. But the last month has been 100% consumed with what are we going to do to support our staff because the schools are closed. Um, that shouldn't be our problem solving responsibility, but nobody else is working on it. And so um, we have to. Um, I've had so many people say, "Oh my gosh, you take such good care of your staff," and I'm like, I wouldn't have any staff if I didn't. And so
Right.
it is an awful lot to think about. I know that I'm commanded to separate church and state, and I don't get to come into work and share my faith boldly, but I don't think there's anything wrong with saying faith. Like, we have to have faith. We have to believe and have hope and be the hope that we need to see in our world. And for those that are here, we're only at about 50% capacity right now. For those that are here, we are a glimmer of light in their lives, right? We are one piece of stability for their children and one piece of stability for the parents. And um, you know, I wonder what a year from now looks like. I mean, I've always been super entrepreneurial and innovative in my mindset, so I think that's been easy for me in leading because every day I'm having to ask the staff to adapt yet again because yet another challenge has come up that we've got to figure out how to navigate. Um, it has never been more difficult for me, though, to find some level of mindful, be still, and feel well within my own soul, because I'm flat out exhausted when I leave here because I've used enough intellect in one day to last a week or a month or a year. You know, it's a lot, but it's never more than we can handle. But I tell you what, the average individual has no idea how much goes on behind the scenes before the letter goes out to the parents, before the staff find out what we're doing. I mean, it's like, and I will say I am so humbled and so grateful for the support. I mean,
Mhm.
we have not faced tremendous criticism or scrutiny. I believe the procedures we put in place are had very minimal exposure. My daughter is in high school and she is on a hybrid approach, and I get an email every day with somebody that's tested positive. And, you know, it's something we're doing is working. I think the staff take it serious, the families are taking it serious, and you know, I just wonder when we're going to be on the other side. I mean, we're not going to go back to life as it was before. This go back to
True.
normal. There's a new normal. But what is it? I just want to know what it is. I want to be there. I want to be there.
I think we all are trying to figure out what that new normal is. But in full transparency, as a parent, I know I called you about, you know, our personal decision to send Mari back. And so you were definitely like, hey, think about it this way. And, you know, one of the other issues with that is like, hey, you take her out, you might be on this waiting list for another year or two, and, you know, you lose your spot. So that's probably like an hour, 2 hour long conversation about just, you know, access and quality. I know we talked a
Yep.
little bit about it, you know, in relation to the centers that you are leading, but just, you know, what does that mean when you talk about, you know, quality facilities and making sure that there are more centers like UICS. So you did
That's
mention this
the,
a little. Go ahead.
well, I was going to say I will say I'm a compassionate leader, and it's
Absolutely.
harder now than ever for me to make tough decisions. When I have to tell a parent, I'm sorry, yeah, you do have to pay. If you're going to maintain your child's slot, either your child needs to come
Yeah.
or you're going to
Yeah.
have to
that
pay
was
to
the that
maintain
was the
that. Like,
conversation
that
too.
is a tough conversation to have. Love your baby, but I can't run a business like this at the end of the day, and we can't compensate our staff at the level we do. We can't deliver the excellent services that we provide without the revenue. And so,
Right.
you know, we already have a tricky revenue model because we're a nonprofit and we're constantly beg, borrowing, and stealing to try to get by. And the cost of what we do is even higher now with all the PPE and modified schedules and, you know, maintaining social distancing so you can't have as many kids in, so you can't as roll. I mean, it is a complicated equation to try to figure out how to run this business now. But we're going to figure it out, and we will keep, you know, and it's actually caused us to really think about ways that we can tighten our belt
Mhm.
because we can't afford to do some of the things we used to do. And it's like, maybe we didn't need to do that anyway. Some of it, like I was telling somebody the other day, if I was a superintendent of a school district now, see, I have the fortune. If I was
Right.
running a district or a charter school that had elected board members,
Mhm.
I would just blame COVID for everything, and I'd push through everything I'd been trying to get done. I would just like, I'd just blow the whole thing up and start on over because you could. You could just say, oh, well, COVID made me do it.
COVID made me do it. It sounds like
COVID made me do it.
sounds like a hashtag or a slogan on a t-shirt. But yes, but no, I am totally, you know, just again kind of understanding just the education landscape generally speaking. Was just kind of co-signing to what you were saying, and then just like I said, kind of understanding, you know, just to the point about it is still a business, and so, you know, even when people have asked me about, you know, cost and, you know, hey, this is, and it's quality, you know, it's like, it's always felt like we've gotten a great bargain, so to speak, for what we get in return and what the experience that Mari has, you know, for the cost. So when we had that conversation, I was like, hey, you know, these are our options. This is what we have to consider, but ultimately decided that it was best for all of us that she returned, and obviously she enjoys every minute of being there, even on Saturdays, wants to go to school. So like I said, definitely grateful for that. So Two final questions. You talked a little bit about it earlier, not being able to necessarily bring your faith to work, but just the question about what centers you. So would you say that it's faith in addition to someone, something? Feel free to elaborate on what does keep you sane, or who.
Um, you know, the kids center me. I have a new director of human resources that I was taking on a tour this morning of our new facility, and sitting down with the little guy that's showing us his face and his bug bite, and the other who's showing us his binoculars that he's got on his face the wrong way, and just the kids themselves, and I can still, as I started with, I know what it felt like when I walked into a school that loved me. Like, I love that your daughter wants to come on Saturday. That's a sign of a good school. When
It
your
is. And
kids don't want to go to school,
she calls out for Nikki when she gets in trouble and wants to
yeah,
cover
right, for
sometimes.
real. Come save me. Come save me. Um, you know, the kids keep me centered. Actually, the teachers keep me centered. Teachers that teach here, they're here because they love to teach. Any teacher who loves to teach doesn't mind coming in a pandemic. You know what I mean? And they will figure out their own health and how to be able to be present and available for kids. That drives me and motivates me. It I stay centered. I will, I could do lots of different things at this point in my career. I got to be able to see, feel, touch my impact, and it
Mhm.
has to be at a community level. And Reverend Mann started something special in the 60s, and when this organization was formed in a way that was responsive to the needs of the women in the neighborhood that asked for us to provide a basic child care service so that they could work their way off of welfare. Well, we have time and time again had that level of impact on families. And, you're at a point now where we have the second and third in a family that comes through.
Yeah.
And, many of those families are capable of paying for tuition now because
Mhm.
they don't need Head Start services. They don't need state daycare subsidy because the firm
Mhm.
foundation they got from UICS 2 and 3 generations ago,
Right.
now they're coming to us and they're college graduates and enrolling their babies and
Yeah.
capable of helping, reaching back and helping the other parent in the neighborhood that hasn't quite gotten there yet. And
Right.
I just believe if we all do our own part, that indeed we can have the impact we want to have on our world and our community. And it just, I can see it and feel it. The kids who come in that are clowning the fool, and by the time they leave, they're standing on the microphone talking and leading the graduation. I think the final thing I was starting to say is my own children. And
Mhm.
I've been able to successfully navigate through this education system with them. And I
Mhm.
use my own personal experiences as a parent to help inform the work that I do because I haven't had the best experiences all the time. I'm master's degree educated, running a nonprofit, very well informed, very well connected. I've walked into schools and they've known I've got connections that are deep. I don't try to throw that around, but if I can't
Right.
get somewhere, just
Exactly. Exactly.
imagine some of our other parents and the
Mhm.
ways that to the schools and the way they get disrespected. I spend a lot of time with parents trying to help them understand they might not love your baby the way you do and the way UICS does when you leave here. So, I encourage you to take some of this advice we've given you and put it to good use.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Final question. Your call to action. So when you think about the importance of early education, just your call to action centered around the work that you do. What do you need other people to truly understand and take away?
We all know children, whether you have children or you don't have children. My call to action is what part are you going to play? Are you going to write a letter to your senator? Are you going to volunteer in a classroom? Are you going to change careers and go teach yourself? What part are you going to play children and ensuring that we fought too hard to even get to where we are for us not to do more than we're already doing. It causes us to give something up and to do something more. I was just on a call before this around some statewide advocacy efforts, and I know I'm an advocate and a voice, and I've become more bold and courageous with it. And now I'm past the stage in my career where I'm worried about, am I going to get fired? I mean, if I get fired for saying the right thing, doing the right thing, it's worth it. And it takes all of us stepping up and doing something. But we all could do, we might have to be inconvenienced. I remember with my oldest daughter, she's 27 now. We have one car. And in order for my husband at the time to get to work, he had to take it. I took the bus, pushed that little sucker around in a stroller to take her to the best early childhood program, not just a early childhood program, but to the best one. What sacrifice? Are you willing to drive a little bit extra? Are you willing to do a little bit more homework? Some places that we put our kids are not places they should be. And you get what you pay for. Sometimes you have to make a bigger investment than what you're making of your time, your talent, and your treasure. But the long-term gain is well worth the reward. Giving up, some extra materialism just to ensure that your children have the best. And I'm glad that a parent like you, when you had your child on the waiting list before your baby was born, like you knew to put your child on the waiting list before you had the baby. Most parents don't do that. Like, do your homework. Like, don't wait till you're ready. Like, you need to plan ahead. Like that old saying, piss poor planning turns into poor results. That's what happens. If you don't plan well, life's going to plan for you, for your children. And so, there's grandmothers and aunties and all kinds of other people that could be an additional influence. You see that mother or that father that's stressed out, stand in the gap and help out. Don't judge them. Help them out.
I don't know if you're frozen or if that was the end of the talk.
It's kind of the end of the thought. My call to action is just get off the couch and do something.
I just wanted to make clear.
Yeah. I'm like, just be about helping out, because, the educational system as a whole was strained long before the pandemic. Like, none of our school systems were prepared to do all this virtual work other than suburban areas that are more affluent. And, in Kansas City proper, every school district, every early childhood program could use some extra help, whether it's volunteering, writing a check, whatever it maybe would be. Just do one small thing, something.
Well, no, and then I would say to sum all that up is do what you can as you can, and as you have the opportunities to elevate, using your voice in the ways that can support, because I really do believe it takes all of us to help support the babies, support the teachers, support the system. So I got you, Miss CEO. So awesome. Well, thank you. My AirPods have died on me, but
thank you for taking the time to listen to little old me. And I
love you. I love St. Mark and everything that you all stand for. So I'm just happy to use the voice that I have to help. Thank you for again all that you do to help lead the center, and really is great to see a third location here in the city.
Like only crazy me would say we're opening another one in the pandemic.
Right. But it's great. It's great to know that it just continues on. So this is your legacy for Kansas City, and you're taking Kansas City as your adopted home, and we appreciate you. So thank you.
Well, and I appreciate being welcomed with open arms.